Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. And someone will say his career can never be saved. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage.
Welcome to Just Nicolas Cage, where I very slowly work my way through Nicolas Cage's filmography. And today I'm talking about the 2016 crime thriller, The Trust. In The Trust, Nicolas Cage plays a police officer that works in the evidence impound department alongside Elijah Wood. Nick Cage stumbles across a bail bond receipt for a drug dealer who got out on a $200,000 bail, which he thinks is suspicious. Cage ropes Elijah Wood into his investigation, where they discover that the dealer has been depositing something into a heavy-duty vault, and Nick Cage is determined to crack his way into that vault with some help from Elijah Wood. If you haven't been following along with my channel, we've been on quite the losing streak recently with the last 6 Nicolas Cage movies I've covered. So overall, this movie is not good. But seriously though, yeah, this movie is bad. So overall, this movie is bad. So overall, well, that movie was a movie, I guess. Alright, what else is going on? So overall, this is a mediocre version of Insidious. It's mid-sidious. I wonder what it would be like to have both male and female genitalia. Hey, who put that last clip in there? And by the way, don't worry, this isn't a clip show episode. But I'm pleased to say that today's movie, The Trust, is a film that I quite like. For the most part, I do have an issue with it, but we'll talk about that later. So this is a heist movie, and at this point in Nick Cage's career, Nick Cage has certainly dipped his toes into the heist genre, usually within some sort of combination of a different genre. But I think The Trust is the most conventional straight-up heist movie he's done, and we get to see the heist play out in great detail. The characters want to get into a vault, so they plan it out. Elijah Wood's character spends 3 hours making a giant floor plan of the building using tape, which is a great visual. And when the heist actually starts in The Trust, there's long sequences without any dialogue where we see Nick Cage and Elijah Wood assembling their gear and working on the drill to get into the vault, and we watch the hardships and struggle and snags play out in a realistic way. I think a lot of other filmmakers would have made this part more of a flashy process, but I liked how real it felt, and it raised the tension somewhat. I also like that for most of the movie, the audience doesn't know what's in the vault. We know that there's a drug dealer who's been consistently loading something into a heavy-duty vault that's encased in 36 inches of steel, but that's kind of all we know for a lot of the runtime. And that really got me speculating, like, what's gonna be in the vault? Money? Drugs? Marcellus Wallace's soul? At one point, I legitimately had the theory that inside the vault was some sort of Pandora's box scenario. And they'd open it and a bunch of demons would fly out and the drug dealers would be like, "You idiots, you've unleashed all the evil into the world." But that would be a different movie. A movie that I hope gets made one day, but a different movie nonetheless. And I'll discuss what's actually in the vault later when I unpack the ending. But I realize that I'm making this movie sound a lot more serious than it is, but it's actually more of a dark comedy. There's an offbeat, quirky tone for a lot of the runtime, which I think kept things interesting. Something that I like that it did is that it would have these little digressions in the middle of a scene. Like here, Cage is trying to lay out the plan for Elijah Wood at the bar, but Elijah Wood's attention drifts over to a guy who looks like he's getting a hand job while eating his food. There's another part where Cage and Elijah Wood are on their lunch break from breaking into the vault, but Cage just starts going on about his sandwich.
How far are we? What's up?
They changed the recipe. No, it has my approval. We're about halfway through.
And I like that the writing isn't A to B. I think it's refreshing that just because the movie we're watching is about a heist, it doesn't mean that that's all the characters are allowed to talk about. I mean, why wouldn't he talk about his sandwich? And that kind of stuff gave me Coen Brothers vibes in a way. The Trust was actually directed by the brothers Benjamin and Alex Brewer. And Benjamin Brewer later directed the 2024 Nick Cage movie Arcadian. And I don't want to jump the gun, but let's just say that when I review Arcadian in like 35 movies time, I'm gonna need my shaky cam complaint jar handy because, oh boy, the camera work in that movie. But anyway, I quite like the direction in The Trust. I really like the way some shots were framed. There's several moments where it juggles the foreground and the background in a fun way. Like this gag where Cage and his captain are casually talking while a criminal runs away in the background. And this part where we see Elijah Wood up front in the car and Nick Cage running off in the background and he drops the walkie-talkie and then runs to get it. And I'm still 50-50 on as to whether Nick Cage actually accidentally dropped the walkie-talkie in real life there. But when the heist begins properly, we get this part where Elijah Wood and Nick Cage storm the apartment with guns. And in this scene, the style of direction completely changes to a handheld camera style with visceral movements whipping around, and there's no music in the background, we just hear breathing and muffled audio in a way that really added tension. It was quite effective. But you know, outside of unpacking some of the characters' veiled motivations and the ambiguity of the ending, The Trust is not a particularly deep film. But in terms of themes, I've seen the directors describe the movie as being very much about dreams, and about masculinity and midlife crises. And yeah, there's a little bit of all of those things in here. There's also, I think, a commentary on corruption in the police force, because all the cops are bastards. And I'm just talking specifically about the cops in this movie, obviously. But yeah, everybody related to the police department in this movie, from the captain who's more concerned with his son-in-law getting a lawnmower than improving his department, to Randy from My Name is Earl, who's a psychotic cop who's prone to making people play Russian roulette, to the permit officer who takes a bribe, and of course the two main characters. All of these people are either inept at their job or corrupt. It's not the most flattering portrayal of law enforcement. But I think the centerpiece of this movie is really its character dynamic between the two evidence collectors turned thieves played by Elijah Wood and Nicolas Cage. Because the two of them are such a great combo here. Their characters are quite different from each other. Elijah Wood is jaded and couldn't care less about his job and spends most of his time smoking weed with his cat in his room. It almost feels like this could be a sequel to Wilfred. Whereas Cage takes his job fairly seriously, but he's a very kooky, offbeat individual. And the two play off each other so well. Elijah Wood and Nick Cage have great chemistry. But as the heist planning gets further along, cracks begin to form in their relationship. There's a great part where Nick Cage says that he messed up and he didn't get the van even though that was his responsibility. And Elijah Wood just completely freaks out at him.
We're about to risk our lives here. Do you realize that? Do you have any clue how dangerous it is what we're trying to do? How many things can go wrong? Or are you just unable to see that at any point?
I picked it up and I stashed it by the airport this morning. I'm sorry, David. It was just a little pre-heist joke.
Man, this movie is basically what would happen if Mark and Jeremy from Peep Show tried to rob a vault. There's also some effective moments where there's no dialogue, but the scene still says a lot. Like, look at this uneasy, intense look that they give each other here. It says so much without them saying a word. Elijah Wood's performance is quite good here. Apparently, the actor Jack Huston was initially attached to the role. And in my opinion, I think that Jack Huston is probably a better actor in general than Elijah Wood. And even recently, I thought he was good in Spider Noir. And also, really quickly, how great was Spider Noir, by the way? I loved it. But anyway, I don't know if Jack Huston could play the likable loser as well as Elijah Wood does here. Elijah Wood nails that nervous, in-over-his-head look. And despite him being kind of a burnout loser, I think he was able to make me root for him for a lot of the movie. But if we're talking about good casting, then we've got to talk about my evidence officer Ombre, played by Nicolas Cage, who is cast to perfection here. This movie really plays into Nicolas Cage's wheelhouse. There's plenty of opportunities for funny deliveries and quirks that work for this character that initially seems like a quirky, corny, nerdy guy.
I have an idea. It's kind of wacky.
There's tons of funny Nicolas Cage moments. He does the Dumb and Dumber breath freshener the wrong way gag. I love this part where Nick Cage is doing a funny dance while all the hotel staff are entertained by him. And this is just part of a montage, so we don't know the context as to why the hell he's dancing around, but it's kind of funnier that there's no context. But the standout comedic scene in this movie to me was his phone call to Germany.
Kann ich Ihnen helfen?
Ja, hallo. Einen Moment. Einen Moment.
I could listen to Nicolas Cage say, yeah, hello, all day. Actually, do you guys want to hear an Englishman say hi to a German?
Hello. Hallo.
But there is a darker side to Nicolas Cage's character in this movie that I need to discuss, and big spoilers from here on out. So there's a pivotal moment where Nick Cage meets up with a gun dealer called Bobo, and Nick Cage is acting all goofy and awkward with him.
I'm Jim, by the way.
And then at one point, Nick Cage inspects the gun that he's about to buy, and then this happens. And that's when I realized, oh no, this isn't just a goofy, funny Nicolas Cage performance. This is Nicolas Cage playing a cold-hearted killer that's pretending to be goofy, funny Nicolas Cage. It's quite the shocking reveal. And after that scene, whenever Nick Cage did something funny, it just felt kind of sinister, because now I know that that's just part of his persona. And after Elijah Wood finds out that Cage killed a seemingly innocent person during the heist, he also starts looking at him differently, even when Cage is doing something wacky.
Okay, you know the drill.
And first of all, that is hilarious and I love it, no notes. But second, I like how it cuts to Elijah Wood looking at him like, who is this guy? This guy just murdered a potentially innocent hostage and now he's making dad jokes. What the hell? And after the reveals with Nicolas Cage's character, I began to reevaluate everything I brushed off about his character as being just wacky old Nick Cage. Like this part where Cage eats a lemon that he covered in hot sauce and then he persuades Elijah Wood to eat one and they have this exchange.
Oh. It tastes good to you?
Nah, it doesn't.
And again, hilarious. But looking back, I think that moment was Nicolas Cage testing the water to see if he could get Elijah Wood to go along with what he wants him to do. I think in his mind, he's like, if I can get this moron to eat a spicy lemon, then I could probably talk him into helping me rob a drug dealer. And that's not the only clue that Nick Cage has been manipulating Elijah Wood. Throughout this movie, Nick Cage is constantly buttering him up and talking about how cool Elijah Wood is. And it's another thing that seemed funny at the time, but in retrospect, you can really see the manipulation at work.
Wow, that sounded so cool. The way you just said that right now, that sounded cool. You're a positive thinker, and I respect you. And I fucking dig you.
I haven't seen a guy flirt with Elijah Wood that hard since Samwise Gamgee. And the crescendo of Nick Cage's anger in this movie happens when Elijah Wood won't tell Cage the combination to the vault, in a scene that I like to simply call, open it.
Open it! 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 Open it!
You know, something tells me that he wants him to open it. Seriously though, goddamn was that intense. It's especially crazy because he was so aloof for so much of the movie, and then we finally see what I assume is the real him, and it's terrifying. As for the rest of the supporting cast, this movie is mainly a two-man show, so I don't have much to say here. But I feel like I've got to bring up the fact that Jerry goddamn Lewis is in this movie for some reason. Jerry Lewis plays Nicolas Cage's dad, and he's only in a couple of scenes where he makes vaguely profound statements about what a good cop should do. He's not given much to do, but apparently it was Nick Cage's idea to cast him, and they were friends in real life, so the novelty of them playing father and son is pretty cool. But at the start of this video, I mentioned that I have a big issue with this movie, so let's talk about the ending. So we find out that inside the vault is what appears to be at least $1 million worth of diamonds. Elijah Wood feels bad for the hostage that they took who lives in the apartment above where the vault is, and he lets her make a phone call to her husband. Cage and Elijah Wood discover that there's tons of hidden guns in the apartment that the woman denies any knowledge of. Cage says that he plans to kill the woman, take the diamonds and sell them, and then him and Elijah Wood will both fly to the Bahamas together. But Elijah Wood thinks that Nick Cage has gone too far and he ends up killing him. Elijah then leaves the diamonds behind and takes the hostage in his car with the intention to release her. But before he can do that, a couple of vehicles pull up alongside him and they murder Elijah Wood. And it's heavily implied that these were the people on the other side of the phone when the woman rang earlier. Now, I don't think that's an awful ending, and I've certainly watched Nicolas Cage movies with worse endings. Knowing and Dying of the Light certainly come to mind in that department. But it's sure an unsatisfying ending to me for a few reasons. First off, I don't think the drastic change in tone fully worked. The whole movie toes the line of dark and comedic quite well, but the pitch black ending didn't really sit right with me. It just kind of left me feeling a little bit sour and kind of wondering what the point of it all was. Is it a commentary on the pursuit of the American dream? I don't know, I just wasn't prepared for something this nihilistic. And that kind of ending can work in a crime movie like Reservoir Dogs, but I just don't think this movie particularly earned that kind of ending. And to me, the whole reveal with the woman not really being who she seemed wasn't the shocking twist that I think the movie wanted it to be. I mean, she's in an apartment surrounded by hidden guns on top of a diamond vault. And I think maybe my negative reaction to the ending is a testament to how much I liked Elijah Wood's character in the movie. I was genuinely rooting for him, only for him to be unceremoniously killed at the end. But I also didn't really want Nick Cage to go full villain at the end either. I quite liked the dynamic of the two working together, so I thought it was kind of a shame when Elijah Wood killed him. Something that might have actually saved the ending for me is if it turned out that Cage only faked his death, and then he goes off to the Bahamas with all the money. But maybe I'm just saying that because I love Nicolas Cage, and it probably would have been weird if the hostage-killing psycho got a happy ending. But then again, Con Air kinda ended like that. But I think my biggest problem with the ending is that the movie did such a good job at building up the mystery, only for the ending to leave so much unexplained. Like, who really were those people in the apartment with the guns and in the van at the end? And who was the drug dealer guy? And how and why were there so many diamonds in the vault? And also, what the heck is the deal with Nicolas Cage's character? I really would have liked concrete answers to all of those things, but I have been looking around on the internet at a few theories, and also I have a few of my own. Here's a few theories I found from my good pal Reddit as to whose diamond safe it was. This guy thinks that dirty cops are involved and they're working with drug dealers. This guy said something very similar in that he thinks the cops and the cartel were in cahoots. This guy goes into a lot of detail about the nature of a trust in the monetary definition. But this guy has the most intriguing theory to me. He says the diamonds belong to Nick Cage. He was robbing himself and that's why he knew about the vault and what was in there. All the clues were there. And I think that guy's onto something. Nick Cage in this movie clearly knew more than he was letting on. He very quickly gets obsessed with this mission as soon as he hears that a drug dealer was bailed on a large sum. But that lead really could have gone nowhere. And if you didn't know for sure what was in the vault, then would you really take out a home equity loan on your house to fund a heist? And there's also other little things, like he's able to rig up an improvised explosive using gunpowder suspiciously easily. And not to mention the obvious that we see him murder multiple people without any remorse. So here's my personal theory. Nick Cage was a thief who ran with criminal syndicates, and he heard rumblings and rumors of a trust. You know, some sort of shared treasury of diamonds where all different thieves, conmen, drug dealers, and maybe dirty cops pool together their earnings. But Nick Cage never actually saw the location of where that trust actually was. Then Cage was ousted from that syndicate, probably because he's such a wildcard maniac that couldn't be trusted. So he got a job in evidence collection at the police department to hopefully one day pick up the thread of where the criminals are keeping their stash. Actually, the Stash would have been a great name for this movie. Stash of diamonds and Nick Cage is rocking a stash. It works on so many levels. And you know what? I'll admit I am kind of having fun using my imagination to speculate about what happened. But I also would have probably preferred some actual closure to the loose ends. So overall, the losing streak is over. I enjoyed this movie. It's quirky, it's funny, it's well-paced, it's well-directed and well-acted, and it managed to keep me on edge for most of the runtime. But yeah, that ambiguous downer ending to me I think caps this movie at being just a movie I like, as opposed to being a movie I really like. I do recommend it for pretty much everybody though. It's a fun watch and Nicolas Cage has a mustache and eats a lemon with Tabasco sauce on it, so it's worth watching for that alone. So the next thing Nicolas Cage was in was Dog Eat Dog, so until then, thanks for watching.